everybody, and welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. This is the podcast where we chase the truth wherever it runs, and we've run right past episode 150, and we're now starting episode 151.
151.
Oh, I just let you do it. So
incorrect.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're just glad that you guys are joining with us. We hope that if this is your first time, you have a great time. My name is Greg Harris. I'm the senior pastor at the church that sponsors the podcast called Olive Branch Community Church. Amazing church. Come check us out sometimes. Love to have you guys here. And what we're doing is we're picking up stuff that was left out of the message or rabbit trails that open up from the message from Sunday and kind of looking around at various aspects there with some questions. So we hope that you enjoy these things. And guys, how can they participate? And by the way, how are you guys? Good to see you.
I'm good. My name is Stephen Oldham. I'm the local outreach coordinator here. And thank you for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. And also, if you're listening to us while you're walking, hello, have a nice walk. I know somebody said that they were listening to us while we're walking. Yeah. So, yeah.
Please don't watch while you're walking because that might end up.
Well, you can. It just be funny.
No. Only on
and don't drive
on a
treadmill.
Yeah.
Yes. And if you're walking and you're walking your dog, make sure you have one of those little green bags with you.
That's your PSA for the day.
That Public service announcement by Brent Bradshaw.
But if you are listening to us, make sure you subscribe to that channel and give us a rating on your subscription. But more importantly, in any format, make sure that you share it with a friend. Let them know that we're out here. And we thank you for watching and listening.
Yeah, my name is Brent Bradshaw. I'm the Connections Pastor here at Olive Branch Church. And once again, we would love to hear your comments. We would love to read your and discuss your questions. And it doesn't have to be on the topic that we're on. Just any life question, any theological question you want answered, just email that to rabbittrail@obcc.church, rabbittrail@obcc.church. We'll pick that up and we will discuss it on the next show, probably. So,
sweet. Shaka laka. All right. So that's the end of the show. If you said boom shaka laka, so we're getting to skip. So what are we doing here today? How's it looking? What do you got like on tap for us?
I don't have a whole lot on tap, but how's it looking? And you're looking good. You look like you've lost some weight. So what are you doing to lose weight and get in shape?
Eat less.
Move
more.
Wow.
That's my combination.
All right. Because I feel like I'm gaining weight. And
I'm just giving it to you. I'm like osmosis.
Passing it off.
I know. I was brushing my teeth this morning thinking I'm putting on weight. And I just think it's because I've got a lot on my plate.
Brenton's terrible jokes. I thought you were going to tell me you were brushing your teeth. Man, you sure were getting exhausted. I'm like,
you have to do a sit-up every day.
Yeah, I wear my Fitbit on the hand that I brush my teeth in,
I got up to 50.
Yeah, get at least 32 steps.
Oh, that's one of the best things. Like, if you ever want to just multiply your steps and cheat, just clap. Like at church, I'm like, I'll be clapping, and it's
maybe that'll be a way to get people to clap in church.
Man, yeah, if you want to cheat on your steps,
come to church.
Come to church and clap. It's not lying because the Fitbit doesn't have a moral code. It's just going to count it as steps.
Neither do you. No,
I just duct tape it to my neighbor's dog's tail. And say, hey boy. That's a lot less exhausting than clapping.
Yeah. You're on a roll, baby.
Boom, chakalaka.
Please stop it.
Okay. And Stephen, you have any first impressions today?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple here. I'll probably do one because the rest of them are mostly just statements. But this one I thought was interesting.
We like statements.
So this is in regards to thinking eternally, the value of sacrifice and faith. I'm not quite sure you remember what part of the it's pulled out of from our long-term format, but this is a question someone sent in response. So this might jog your memory because it's in the podcast clips.
Who's on the face?
Huh?
Who's the face?
It's my face.
Okay, well, then maybe you'll remember.
Maybe I'll remember. Doesn't always mean that. Sometimes I see a face and it switches to someone else.
Yeah,
I'm the thumbnail. Well,
you guys get most of the shorts, and so once in a while I'll see my face on one of the shorts, and I'll go, "Oh, good," and I'll click it, and then it goes to Greg, and then he talks, and I'm like,
"Well, that's because they know they're gonna click it if it's you."
Last week though, yours was the one everybody commented on. So this week it's just a mixture of all three. So this question is in thinking eternally, the value of sacrifice and faith. This person writes, the value has nothing to do with what you make it, but with what you make it. Jesus saw your value, laid down his life in your place to pay for the debt that you have made, and will make, and you can never earn it. So that's kind of weirdly worded. And will make, and you can never earn it. That's how it's spelled. It's only by his grace that he remembers you. Humans always try to take control back. First, do you believe in him? Great, that's nice. We all start somewhere, but like anything else, believe you're an artist, and actually picking up the pencil to draw indicates whether you are or not. So far, so good. What do you guys think of just that so far?
Again, not sure what the comment is, but
so
your value isn't earned. Your value isn't arbitrary. Your value can't change. We just did this in my worldview class, where it's based on the fact that you're made in the image of God.
And as for being an artist, I can pick up the paints and pick up the brushes until I touch the easel. I'm not an artist.
Well, I don't know, man. I was in kindergarten. I was an artist.
Yes.
Your parents put everything up. So it says, those who truly believe will be fear and respect God, follow, lean, learn, grow, and perform, and lay down his life there to pursue to know him and know him better. You're not earning eternity. You're not learning how to know your maker, adapting to be less offensive or in him, or grieving that you ever put in him that possession in the first place. So I think what he's trying to say, there's some misspelling there, is just that putting God as the first possession. He asks you to spread the word, heal the sick, cast the demons, and take care of the poor, and not for the show of a man, not but vanity, but for his sake alone. So he talks about him being a sheep and being known and being fruit. So I appreciate the comment. And the only thing I want to address is I don't think he says this, but it's kind of hard to tell, is when it comes to value, does God look at our value and then say that's good, or do we have some value that he likes? Because oftentimes people will say, and I don't think he's saying this, but some people will say something like, God saw that I had some good in me, and so he saved me and then helped me with the rest. There's kind of this kind of idea of how I struggle with, am I good, or am I not good enough, or what's good about me and there are some faiths that literally say you do your best and then God makes up the rest. And that's not necessarily why did God save us? Because he found he had value in us. Sometimes it can sound like I have value, so therefore God saved me. And that doesn't sound the same as, there's nothing in me that has redeeming value that I could save myself with it. And so just kind of explain.
So I think the tension that we're getting into is a tension in the story of Christianity, right? We're a creation, and this gets in.
God says we're good, right?
And we're made in his image, and so there's a value that's inherent that's in there. And so when we say like, oh, there's a good, that doesn't mean there's like some kind of like I've done good things and earned anything. Like,
I don't think that's what he's saying, but
that's a danger that people can get to, because we've taken that image and we twisted it up. We haven't broken it so that we've ceased being the image of God, but we do moral evil. And this is where we've got to get away from and people can be valuable as human beings and still do evil things. And that doesn't destroy their value as a human being, in the sense it actually makes it worse, because now you've taken something valuable and you've besmirched it. You've made it, and this is actually where I think God's anger kind of erupts from in this sense. I used to use it as like saying that God gave us his ID, and then we took his ID and we ran around while he was, and we used it, making him out to be some evil, horrible, like child molester or something like that. And then when we get back, we're like, oh, here's your ID back, and he's getting arrested for horrible things. They're like, what did you do to my reputation? What did you do to my ID? Like, that's not why I gave that to you. Yeah, it was still his ID. It's still his value. It's still his stuff. But we're the ones who mess it up. So is he redeeming us because we have value? He redeems us because he loves us. He redeemed humanity, yes, because we're made in his image. And yes, there's an inherent value, but that's not like, it's not a good in you as an individualistic thing. Like, oh, he sees like you're super special in this place, that's why he saved you. No, he saves all humanity. He wants to save all of humanity because we're made in his image. And so he went to great pains to pay that ultimate cost of his life for our life, in which he's literally valuing us in that act. And so there's a lot to that conversation, and it fits a lot into what we're going to talk about later about like spiritual blindness and stuff like that. Because
tell me if this illustration seems to work. So I know my dad likes to take old Corvettes, and they can be quite pricey, but they don't run. And he sees value in them and pays a certain price for them. But then he doesn't leave them that way. He kind of restores them back to their original intent because somehow they've fallen out of alignment, or they broke, or they're just out of misuse. Is it similar to that? Would you say that was close to what happens, that there's an intrinsic value in the way that you're created that God sees because you're created in his image, yet he still sees the brokenness that needs to be fixed?
Yeah,
I know all metaphors break down. But.
Right. I think where the metaphor breaks down is that, well, we're not a broken car, right? We're not broken in the same way a car stops working well. We're literally.
You haven't seen me drive.
We're morally bankrupt.
We are evil.
That's
like we've done evil. We don't have any. We've taken all of that, all those good. So that's why I really think when I think of the image of God, I argue it's the attributes of God within us in a limited fashion. I've had this conversation a lot, and but then what we do is we take God's attributes, we take his idea of justice, and we twist it into our idea of justice. We take his idea of truth, and we go, it's our truth. So we take these attributes of who God is, and we twist them all up. And so it's legitimately, we're just we're misusing who he is. That makes us evil. And so that can't be untwisted. We can't. You ever tried to straighten out some kind of bent rod to get it straight? You just can't. You can't do it. I know people are gonna be like, I'm a guy who can put under heat and bang it out. I'm just saying, you can't untwist what you twisted. You can't double stamp, triple stamp. It's not possible with your own hands. You can twist it, but with your own power to make it perfectly straight again, you got to have some other heat, some other outside source, something that's going to help you out. But and so again, all analogies break down, but that's the idea, and it's super hard to talk about objective value versus subjective value.
That's what I'm getting. Like, to me, a lot of people in the world says the opposite. Like, oh, no matter who you are, what you do, however you are good the way you are. So don't try to do anything. You don't really need God. If I'm a pretty decent person, I don't see the damage that I am or anything like that. So it's like buying the car and then just leaving it a mess.
We're equivocating on the word good.
Yeah.
Which means that we're using two definitions for good in the argument, so that you're not seeing us switch it out on you.
I do think there's two different views of value, right? That's kind of in this discussion. Is one, the value that is intrinsic in us because we are created in the image of God. So, and I've heard you say this before, Greg, where that's one reason why you don't believe in a nihilism, where you just cease to exist when you die, or God just burns you up and then everything is over. That he respects and values the fact that there is the image bearer in you still, regardless if you're going to hell or not, that he values that to the point that he won't completely destroy it.
Yeah, I think it's good to say respects it. Yeah. Right? He honors the image.
Yeah.
Even though the person has used it for evil.
And then I feel like there's that other side of value where, I know that some people struggle with value in their life.
Why
and, and just like, I'm not really worth anything. I always kind of just point to the fact that the value doesn't come from the inside, really. Value is an external process, right? Because like, one of the illustrations I use is you take a Mickey Mantle rookie card and you take the Hope Diamond, right? I mean, when you look at those, really, what is their value? It's 3 cents worth of cardboard with some cheap ink, or it's a clear rock. I mean, really, what value do they have, right? Till somebody says, no, I'm willing to pay $60,000 for that rookie card, or, endless amounts of millions of dollars for that diamond. Now, regardless of the true value of those items, somebody said that's what they're worth, and therefore that is the value of them. And so again, when we look at us being created in God's image, and even though we are broken and fallen and immoral, he said your value is the fact that I would give my only son to redeem you back to me, and Jesus was like, I will lay down my life to redeem you back to the Father. And so I think that we should never lose sight of that. And in understanding our value through God's eyes in that sense, that it should draw us to him, and desire to please him. We're not valuable because we're pleasing to him, because at that point we're not. But it should drive us to desire to please him out of our appreciation, our love, and our gratitude for the value that he's given us.
You get into value and you're going to wind up in a lot of different directions, from not just because the danger in this, hey, you're like the Mickey Mantle card, God paints you as valuable, but your intrinsic value is actually 3 cents. Like the intrinsic value is actually 3 cents. The price of this stuff, right? But even then, that's a value laden on how much do you pay for the ink? How much do they want for the cardboard? Yeah, and so, but it's valuable because what the person did and what the person wants. And so value is actually very person laden. And this is something important for
what you're willing to sacrifice for it.
Right, but even more so is that value doesn't exist in a personless world. Like materialists cannot believe in a value system. There's no values without persons. Persons make values. And therefore, there must be an ultimate person who made all the values, because you have to have a source of value. And so when God makes you and values you, that's the true intrinsic value. Otherwise, we have no true intrinsic value anywhere. It is all subjective and depends on what people want to. And at that point, if I think that you're worthless and I think you're valuable, then hey, I'm not. I get to make it up. No, and then we have to argue. No, all these people say you're all valuable. And so that gets a little wonky. We need one person to call the shots of what's valuable or not, and that's why aesthetics has to go back to God being the ultimate value maker. He's giving
the appraiser.
Value
right.
setter.
He's the appraiser. He's the one who looks at you and he calls your value what it is. And he said, all humans are of equal value. You are all equal, made in my image. Done. And that our problem is we think
individual value, though.
We think of it as we think of value as, am I special? And God saw that I was special.
Right.
Something special in me, so he saved me. I think God knows how you're special. I think he makes everybody in a unique way, but I don't think he wanted to save you because of your speciality as much as he just adores who you are and he made you with that speciality, and he saves everybody for a special reason then in that sense, because he knows what everybody's is. But that's not the reason he ultimately saved you, is because of that speciality. He saved you because you're made in his image. He saved you because he loves you. He saved you because he made you, and you have to be saved because you're evil and there's no good in the sense of like moral goodness in you. You took that speciality and twisted it up and broke it. And he's going like, well, I want to redeem it. I don't see it in you as good. You're not using it well. You're not doing what I want you to do with it. But I want to save you so you can. And he does it out of his grace and his love because he wants to. And I think this is the key piece then. I think a lot of people want to turn God's salvation into, well, he had to save me.
Right.
Versus,
because I have value.
He wants to save you. Want is very different than needs to. There's not some deterministic need that God had to save you. There is an actual loving personal want in God's heart to save you. And that's why he sent his son. And I think that changes. It's like, well, if nobody's special, if everybody's special, then nobody is. It's like, that's lame. Like, God sees our individuality. He made us each. You're a gift to you. And yeah, he values that.
And we could do a little test here. You said that, we're all created with the same value, really. And so all of us pull out our wallets, see who has the most cash in our wallet, because that probably puts us over the top of the other ones. If we're all equal at that point, the one with the most money in our wallets is the one that is even more special.
But what if I value my money more than you value yours?
Oh, yeah, that's true, even if it's less.
Yeah.
Oh, you got me there, Pastor.
Because mine might actually have like a serial number on it that is like in sequential order, and that makes my dollar worth like $700.
Or it could be the widow's last two mites.
Yeah, so value, fun stuff, weird world of aesthetics and values.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of people that struggle with feeling their value, but also adding a little bit to what God did for them. This person didn't do that, so I appreciate the comments, but I think what they're trying to say is if you say you believe that the exercise of your faith by doing doing what you say you believe, acting in that way, will be seen, like the artist. Mm. That's pretty much it. Most of them are comments. There's one here that says, we're talking about the power of sacrifice, and this person says, when you're constantly repeatedly robbed, though, you don't worry about later if you don't see punishment or retribution now. So we're talking about the delayed retribution, and then sacrificing yourself for future generations. Any thoughts on that?
I didn't really catch the question.
So sometimes they're like, oftentimes we talk a lot here on the podcast about what we sacrifice for other people, that the currency of love is sacrifice. And some people say, well, when you're robbed repeatedly, you don't worry about later, like what you're sacrificing for later. You worry about your retribution now. Like if someone did something to you, that, delayed judgment is not merciful in many people's eyes.
And that's actually, Tim Keller deals with that in his forgiveness book. He actually says that's the primary problem in our current society of power, that they actually view forgiveness as injustice, and delayed justice as an injustice. And I disagree. I think ultimate justice, all justice is delayed. You cannot if you're going to do immediate justice, then you become judge, jury, and executioner at the moment. And we all know that
and
that
you have
makes
to be there when it happens,
right? And then that makes you an unjust person yourself, because if you weren't there, like, justice is slow and justice is always delayed. I think we have to take that for granted, and justice cannot be fully achieved by human.
That's why it's blind, right? It has to rule out the biases that humans are flawed with.
And so in the United States, we have deemed that we will let you go if you're presumed innocent before you're guilty, because that means we would rather let a guilty person go than ever condemn an innocent one. That's really the aim behind that. But the further we walked away from that to wanting instant justice and like internet instant justice, we become an unjust society. We end up condemning innocent people. We end up condemning, not innocent in and of themselves, but innocent in the actions that they are being accused of. And so I would say that all justice is delayed, but ultimate justice is still justice, especially when it can be shown perfectly and clearly that it was done. And the God who knows all and can bring all up, including the heart's desires, will judge accurately and rightly every scenario that's been done. That's why, as Christians, we can walk in forgiveness, and it's not unjust. We believe the ultimate justice will be done.
Yeah, the only thing I can say to someone who's feeling like, there's a bunch of people robbing me repeatedly, because we live in a world that, the people say the government's robbing them, their neighbors are robbing them, maybe their kids are robbing them. So why should I sacrifice for someone else if this is what they're going to do with what I have? And that's if you were sacrificing only for them. Sometimes there's a world in which you want to model for people that you're sacrificing for the sake of God, showing everyone else, this is what I call good, this is what I think is good. And if other people squander that isn't for you to say in some manner. Sometimes they have to leave that stuff up to God. But also, you have to have boundaries. You can't just let people constantly walk on you without some kind of proper boundaries in certain kind of relationships. So I wouldn't say that you're just doling out money to everybody is the impression. I'm saying things more like, you teach them the value of hard work. You spend more time talking to people. You try to persuade your neighbor, not coerce them. You try to live out the principles of goodness for others to see so that they could pass them on to other people. So a lot of times this can be interpreted as monetary. And I don't think leaving a legacy for another generation has to just be monetary. I think it has to be moral in some ways.
Yeah. The other thing is that I would challenge the analogy. If somebody is being robbed constantly and they feel like, then why should I sacrifice for somebody else? Then I would just ask, are you robbing God? God is robbed constantly. Everything is taken. We take everything for granted from him, from the very life we live to the independent desires of our libertarian thinking, whatever it is. And we go, and you rob from God. At which point then, God should condemn you and punish you instantaneously, right? Because why would he sacrifice on your behalf except that he loves you and has done that? And therefore, the calling as Christians is to imitate God. If I'm somebody who's being robbed from, then you know what? Yeah, I need to be somebody who's willing to forgive and still sacrifice on their behalf. think that's why we like certain books. For example, Les Miserables.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally was robbing from the priest, and the priest is like, nope, I bought your life with this. And you're like, which is more noble? Which is the more grand imagination? The vengeance slaying John Wick, or the amazing overwhelm? Like, I don't think John Wick movies are going to be watched, 500 years from now, or whatever it was when Les Mis was written. But I think it's 200 years or something now. But it's like, I think Les Mis will be still read hundreds of years from now because of the import of that message. So there's a different moral imagination going on there.
Yeah. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, we kicked off a new sermon series this week called Aperture, and the subtitle on this one was "Seeing His Mission," being Christ's mission. And if you wanted to follow along, it's the book of Mark. We're going through the book of Mark still, chapter 6, verses 7 through 29. And so, just getting into that. One of the first things you were talking about, I think it was in your introduction, is that we're born with a spiritual aperture. And for people that don't understand what aperture is, it's basically, on a camera lens, it opens to bring in more light if it's not well lit, and then it closes to bring in less light when it's too bright out, so that you get a clear picture. And it's not really distorted. So you were saying that we're born with a spiritual aperture where, because of the fall, we are in the dark and blind to God's creation and his signature throughout. Or it becomes so bright that we push it away. So our spiritual aperture is tainted to the point that we are so blinded by the darkness that we can't see God, or he is so bright, his righteousness is so bright that we push it away, and either way,
or re-explain it even,
yeah,
especially when it comes to God. So
and so you also said that Jesus wants us to see, but when you were saying that, one of the things that went into my head was, and again, I just want to preface this. I know that I bring this up. I'm not a Calvinist for the most part, and so
you just play one on TV.
I know, and I bring up Calvinist Arminian topics all the time. But I just feel like it's a good play. It's been a debate for thousands of years, so it's one of those things that you bring up. But it's either too dark, we can't see; too light, we push it away because it hurts to look at it. And then Romans, I believe it was talking about that.
We're going to have to make this a spot. Brent the Calvinist. Brent the Arminian.
Exactly.
Which one is he?
Boom. That no one seeks after God. No, no one is good. No one seeks after God. No, not one.
It's Romans 3.
And so what you're saying there, and with that verse, which I think Calvinists or Reformed theology point to that as we're unable to come to God. Nobody seeks God. Nobody looks for God. No, not one. So then how does that all play out? If we are blind or we push God away, and the Bible says nobody seeks God, then how do we come to God?
So this is actually the same argument in both Arminian and Calvinist positions. So
that would be the Calvinist argument: is nobody seeks God. Well, God seeks you.
The Arminian, that would be the Arminian position as well.
It'd be all of the positions.
All Christian positions hold to inability. Like no Orthodox position holds that you have an ability to actually seek God and save yourself. So that would be. That's the first thing I want to say.
You can seek him, but if he's not willing to talk to you, this is the problem that I think, what was it, Hume and Kant, I can't remember which one, that he's like, there's no way we would, in our own perception, be able to know what God thinks. And that's why we're like, because God would have to tell us. So he would have to be the initiator.
Yeah, there's also this implication that people will say, and this is a theological import, that and all theologians would agree with this as well. There's no one who winds up in hell that didn't
want to be there,
didn't want to be with Jesus. Like, I need to make that clear. Like, nobody goes like, oh man, I wish I was with Jesus, and they wind up in hell. Like, that's not going to happen. So, or want to be
clear
with Yahweh.
I do
so,
like that.
And so when it comes to this, like, how does somebody with a aperture that's either locked tight, and I always like wondering, it's like, you can misinterpret spiritual light. I think drugs can open up yourself to a spiritual world, like, but it may not be the divine world in the sense of God's divine light and his divine knowledge.
You might be playing in a world that you're not very strong in either.
Yeah, and there are powers out there. I mean, it says that Satan walks around as an angel of light. It's not that he's like some scary dark shadow demon. It's
enlightenment.
Yeah, he's light, and but then there's Christ, who is the light of the world. He's the divine light, and it's shining in. I mean, John 1 is an interesting kind of example of how this language plays in. He says, "All things were made through him. Without him, not a thing was made. In him was life, and he was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." But then he says that the true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. And so he came to his own people, and they did not receive him. So this is that picture, like the light shined, and they went, we don't understand it, A, or B, we don't receive it. Our spiritual apertures are closed. So how do we come to know it? Well, the answer has been given in two forms. On one form is that God bestows grace. This is the Reformed version picture, that God bestows grace upon you so that he gives you faith, and in faith he regenerates you so your spiritual aperture opens and you can see God. And when you see God, the regeneration has shifted your attitude to God. You don't mistake him and you don't reject him, you receive him. Because they would argue, if you are a rebel and you meet the king, what do? You try to kill the king, because, man, this is the greatest opportunity in the world as a rebel. I'm going to kill the king. And if your heart is in rebellion and you meet God, it's going to be a scary event the first time, not a happy event the first time, because you're going to sense God's judgment and God's pain. That's why I think we have to ask ourselves, like, hey, when was it you realized you were a sinner destined for hell? Right? That question keeps coming back up, because we need to pause and say, when, like, your first encounter with God won't be all rainbows and unicorns, and stuff. But it's not fluffy and happy all the time. It is very often a reckoning in which your sin has come upon you, and then you meet God, and he relieves you. And so, in the Calvinist perspective, they would say that God regenerates you, so you're transformed in the heart and the mind, so you can see him and receive him. The Arminian viewpoint is that man is unable, and it's in the preaching of the gospel that there's a power within the gospel of calling itself that opens the aperture up so that you can see him, and now you have a choice to either receive him or reject him. And so that would be the difference there. And so the Calvinists would then ask, well, how can you receive, if you could even see him clearly, how would you receive him? You're in rebellion against him. And so you're seeing him rightly. Well, no, it's a grace given to you by God to see him rightly. But then you have now a clear, real choice. Do I want to receive this God, or do I want to reject this God?
I will say, when I was in high school, and shortly after I gave my life to Christ, and we just had a few of us guys that were just like on fire for God. We're just sharing the gospel with everybody. I probably had more conversations about God and people giving their lives to God during that time in my life than ever before on a one-on-one basis. But I remember having those conversations with people about, just walking them through, and they would they get it. I get it. I know you're right, and I know that this is true. And it would be like, but I'm not ready. So I don't want to give my life to Christ. And I remembered walking away just kind of like, how can you know this to be true and still reject it, And I liked what you were just saying, that God kind of opens your eyes and gives you a choice to reject it or embrace it.
Well, I think that also when I think about spiritual blindness, Like I really was trying to use that idea of walking around in the A auditorium, our main room.
Yes, I banged my shins many times.
Oh my gosh, it's horrible, isn't it? Like it's never set up right. It's something got moved, something's been out of, there's some lift in the way, and you're like, whoa! I nearly slammed my face into that. It's crazy, but that's what life is like. We think we're walking around and we can see. But if you ever have you ever woken up in a, like you've been in a, like you had that deep sleep and then you woke up and you forgot you were like in a hotel or on the cruise ship or whatever, and you get up to go to the bathroom and like you run right into the wrong thing because your map is the wrong map for the room, right? You ever done that?
I don't know that I've done that, but I've definitely woken up in hotel rooms going, I have no idea where I'm at.
Yeah. And you can't find the light switch, and you can't find, because you're blind, right? You're in that blind spot of like, I don't know where in the world I am. I had a blind friend, and and he is growing up. We would go in the backyard and like, you can't see all this stuff. He's like, no, but I can see it after I touch it, and he could navigate once he knew where things were. But if something got moved, that's why he reached out, because he could in general get around to where he needed to go. And I was always fascinated by that. And then I realized spiritually that's where we're at. We're groping around trying to figure out, and we think we've figured it out. We think we got this map of the room, and then things are shifted on us. And so, for example, I think that one of the reasons people don't, why I'm talking about this is I think people don't get how bad sin is, because you need spiritual light. You need a contrast. How can you know how dark the darkness is when you've never seen the light? How can you know how deep an evil sin is when all you're ever doing is comparing sin, like comparing darkness to darkness? Like, oh yeah, that's why we do things like, I'm not as bad as Hitler. I'm not as bad as this guy at my work. You're comparing the darkness to the darkness. But the second you see the real light, it is so frighteningly good and so frighteningly true that there is this like, whoa, no, I can't do that. That's scary, because that feels overwhelming to how, like, everything flips. You didn't realize what good was or bad was. You didn't know where direction you were going in. And when we're honest and think about it, like it's like turning the light on the room. You're just like, oh, it all makes sense now. I just didn't know where the things were, and I didn't know I was banging into all this stuff, and then occasionally you're dumb and you close your eyes and go bang into it anyway because you want to go sin. So I think it's a really interesting analogy of the spiritual blindness that Jesus uses throughout this section we're going to be in. So I honestly wonder sometimes if atheists are a little bit more honest. Like they're just like, nah, there's nothing there. It's like, at least you're talking like a blind person would be talking. Like you understand it's not there, so you can't see it. So you're not even
doesn't exist.
You're not even going to investigate it. It doesn't exist.
So let me ask you this: you were asking about you kind of made a comment in passing about drugs and whether or not that opens your aperture, and so do you believe that drugs can open your aperture to the light? Because I remember the term in the '60s too was drop acid and you'll see God.
Dennis Leary.
You'll see God. And be
enlightened
and all this stuff. And do you feel like drugs only opens you up to the demonic, or do you feel like it can open you up to other spiritual and not? I don't mean other spirituals. I mean, there's only good and bad, but No,
I think that it tears down there is a hermetic seal that God has produced between the spiritual and the physical for human beings to be after the fall. Like, I think it's Eden where that seal is thin. And so after the fall, we weren't intended to have that access to the spiritual. And so we've always manipulated it. We know it's there. We have interactions with it. I do think drugs open the mind up to the ability to interact a little bit more with the spiritual. I think it really kind of causes some pretty serious ramifications, spiritually speaking. And so I don't think you're dealing with good at that point. Most pharmakeia in the Bible was used to manipulate demons, get the God's will, or to somehow invoke magic to break fate, these kinds of things. Yeah. What do you think, Stephen?
Oh, well, there's two kinds of things when you say drugs, because we live in a world that is argued over the classification of drugs, but I will say there's a difference between restoring your body with drugs to a condition that it's supposed to be and trying to use drugs as a means to open up your mind to some other reality. He was always like, do it responsibly. And I'm like, I don't think that's the intent. I think this reality is the one that I think you're supposed to grasp, in the sense that there is a reality. Trying to find an alternative means to another kind of reality without having any guide is a dangerous proposition. It's kind of like opening up your mind to a universe and not even knowing if it has air, or dropping into the middle of a space. Just opening up your mind to if there is another reality out there, and we believe that is supernatural, without any kind of grounding is going to get you into some really bad situations.
So let's talk about a very popular topic. I mean, Dan Crenshaw has talked about it a lot. They've just, I think, declassified it into, and it's ayahuasca or what is it?
Ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca, right? It's super popular and it's been shown to treat like
usually PTSD
really well. But it is always been used by the Mayans and
the Native Americans as well.
Americans to be used as like a hallucinogenic, mind-opening.
To contact the spirits.
Yeah, to contact the spirit realm and to see into the spirit realm and get wisdom and these kinds of things. And so I know there are going to be Christians who are going to go like, "Hey, is this okay?" I mean, like, and so here's the rub,
called
right?
Burning Man.
Well, I mean, the rub is like, okay, if there's some medicinal effect that can help PTSD, are you doing it to right the PTSD and then you're putting it down, or are you doing it to try to gain some kind of cosmic knowledge? Like, we don't need cosmic knowledge. God's given us the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. The beginning of knowledge is the fear of the Lord. And so we have the spiritual one who's spoken to us clearly in Christ, clearly in his resurrection, clearly by his word through the Holy Spirit. And drugs don't enhance the Holy Spirit. In fact, over and over, this is why Paul said, you don't need to get drunk. Don't put yourself in an induced state. Be filled with the Spirit of God. And I think a lot of Christians, because of the Pentecostal pushback and stuff that's gone on, have stopped seeking God to fill them and to give them knowledge and to seek him out. And we need to go back to some of this, where we're asking God on a regular basis, would you fill me with your Spirit? Give me your knowledge, give me your insight, give me your power. Because I do think he will give you his presence in such a manner that he will empower you to walk in him, empower you to know him better, to have that close relationship.
I do think the reason why the Old Testament forbids some of these actions is because they're possible. I think you can use drugs.
Oh, no, God forbids things that don't work.
I just think you can use drugs to contact things that you don't know what you're contacting. And I do believe the Bible would say you're in a dangerous place. You're going to get deceived. Even if some good comes out of it, if it takes you away from the true God, then it's brought you to a place that's going to be ultimate ruin. So I don't care if it teaches you to invent a new way of energy. If you're taking all these drugs, it's still taking you away from seeking the source where God's coming from. So I just say that you're dealing with a world that is dangerous and has spiritual ramifications. So you got to know you're tapping into the right sources.
Okay. So again, talking about the spiritual realm here, and this is going to be kind of a two-part question. Talking about the spiritual realm. Okay, so we see where Samuel was conjured up, right?
Yeah,
1 Samuel 28.
So Samuel was conjured up, and his spirit spoke to the witch and stuff. And then we also see Elijah, at the Mount of Transfiguration, right, with Moses and Elijah and Jesus, and so he was already gone, and so he was back there again. So number one, the first part of that question is the early Jewish culture. What would they have thought about that? Was reincarnation ever a part of their theology? Which I don't think so, but would it, but then how do they explain the spirits coming back and all that? And then if it wasn't part of their theology of reincarnation and everything else, then they were, John the Baptist, they were talking about he was basically the reincarnation of Elijah, and they were making other comments about John the Baptist.
They didn't think of them. So here, really critical thing here. They wouldn't have thought of Elijah or John the Baptist being a reincarnation. They would have thought of him as risen from the dead. That's a big difference. Like, they would have thought God rose him from the dead. They reconstituted his body and brought him back. That's different. Now, on the mountain of transfiguration, what is Peter seeing? Well, Peter is seeing the veil between heaven and earth thin. That's why he's on a mountain. Mountains are Edenic locations in the mind where heaven and earth come close together. And Jesus is there in his divinity. He's broken the veil between the spirit world and the earth world. And there, Moses and Elijah are, because that's them. That's truly them in their spiritual presence, as they're saints, in the sense of like they were Christians, they were Jewish, but they were Yahweh followers who are Jewish men that represent the law and the prophets. And so you have Jesus, and the law and the prophets are bowing down before in the heavenly realm. And so that's that. And then finally, they believed that in the spirit realm. We've got to stop thinking that, like, we got into this weird enlightenment phase that we're finally waking up from because we got some ancient texts that are showing us, oh yeah, they kind of believed in ghosts and the supernatural beings, and these kinds of things were actually in their mind. We talk about Sheol, the grave, when they didn't translate it Hades for no reason. They used the word Hades because it was the best representation of their concept of a place that in the afterlife that spirits were held. And those spirits sometimes could be pulled up. And those spirits sometimes were brought in. And now people would argue over Samuel because they're like, oh, nobody can have control over a saint like that.
Well, and God would have to allow it, but it doesn't give prohibitions in the Old Testament for things that I don't think are possible.
Exactly.
I don't think that God would say to them, hey, it's against the rules to fly on your own cognizance. Well, that's not something you have to make a law. None of us can do that. So why would he forbid this practice that others said they could do, other than the fact that I think that it's possible? He would have just said they're foolish acts and there's no good in them and they're just taking your money. That would have been the law. It wouldn't have been like, stay away from these evil practices because they're conjuring up people that are not from the dead, or from the dead, and there's spirits involved.
And the practices that bring them about is horrific. Like they would use abortion as one of the primary means of calling up someone dead, because you want to use the preborn to bring out the dead. And so there's a lot
magic offers the sacrifice.
Yeah, a lot of human sacrifice, a lot of abortion went into these tools, and so these things. That's why they were all bound together really tightly in the Old Testament language.
Yeah, and then for Samuel 28, the witch at Endor, there's two interpretations that I've mostly seen. One is that she screams because she sees him come out of the grave, or she screams because she realized now, after seeing him come out of the grave, that the person she's talking to is King Saul, who forbid us from doing all this magic. So those are typically the two ways the commentaries look at it. There are some people that say that it wasn't really that, but then you have to explain how he's prophesying. When Samuel comes back, he's prophesying something and has knowledge of something that only he had knowledge of.
Right.
And so most people in the time of reading that passage in the ancient world would have thought it was really happened. Samuel was
they wouldn't have thought anything.
They wouldn't have thought anything other than that. And also it calls him a spirit that comes up from the ground. So that's the Sheol that we're talking about.
And so in Mark 2, I think it was like verse 14 or something. It was talking about King Herod, and King
Herod's the one that thought that John the Baptist came back from the dead.
It says John the Baptist has been raised from the dead. That is why these miraculous powers are working. Others said he is Elijah. Others said he is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised.
Right. So part of my question on this, and I think you kind of brought it up today, but I think people think when they hear the word King Herod, there was only one King Herod, and so there are other King Herods. So why are there so many King Herods? Where did they come from? And if you could give us any information on some of the other ones. But the King Herod, when Jesus was born, is this King Herod, right?
No, that's Herod the Great.
That's
right?
Herod the Great.
So this is a different King Herod
than one of his sons.
than the one that wanted the report back?
Right. He would die shortly after the birth of Christ.
Okay.
Somewhere around 3 BC is what people think. And so
He's the baby killer.
yeah, and they were all baby killers. But
Yeah, sure. But Herod the Great was the first one.
so
First one in the Bible that I know.
so yeah, you've got like this kind of crazy lineage that comes out of that. Oh, crud.
And this Herod that they're talking about right here in verse 14, he's the one that like had maggots in his stomach or
I
something.
believe
right?
that's the guy who's going to wind up ultimately.
Spoiler alert, people.
Right.
You'll want to be in church that Sunday.
Well, that's an Acts. That's not going to happen in the book of Mark.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
yeah, so this whole situation with Herod is kind of an odd one, considering he's a let me pull something up here, because there's so much, because
There's so many of them.
There's a lot of Herods, and that's what gets really confusing.
So Jesus' birth, that was the first Herod. This
That's
is
Herod the Great.
This is the second Herod. And
So
then
there's Herod Antipas. He's the son of the Herod the Great and Malthus, and he's the tetrarch, the ruler of Galilee and Perea at this time. So this is that Herod Antipas, but they just call him King Herod because they like to be confusing. So he's the one who will kill John the Baptist, and he will be the one who ultimately is going to die of this strange. He'll be involved in the crucifixion of Jesus, and he'll be the one who dies this strange, weird way when he's like eaten by worms from the inside out. So yeah, that's kind of like kind of a gross kind of way it goes. Yeah. But the Herod the second is the son of Herod the Great, and so there's another Herod here, and he's born around 28, but he's Josephus also identifies Herod II as the first husband of Herodias, but Herodias' first husband is Philip. So there's this debate over Herod Philip, and so I mean, really, these are all named John Foreman. Mm-hmm. Oh no, not
George Foreman.
George Foreman. Sorry,
Yeah.
they're all George Foreman. That's George, and this is a George, and that's a George, and that's a George. So they're all Georges, and that's.
And for those of you that don't get that reference, George Foreman, the ex-heavyweight championship of the world, named all 5 of his sons George.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
And then there's Herod. There's all kinds of crazy. There's the Herodians, who are followers. There's Herodias, who is the wife of Herod Antipas and Philip, and there's
2
this
Agrippas.
mess. There's 2 Agrippas now.
Yeah, there's a great grandfather. So the
there's a Herod.
That they're calling him a king to refer to other times, like when Elijah and Jezebel were there. It's almost like an archetype. There's always a ruler, and there's somebody there who hates one of the prophets or one of the people of God and seeks to persecute them. In Elijah's case, God led him away, and he was able to get away from Jezebel and Ahab. And this is King Herod and this woman, and in this story, and yet John the Baptist is killed, and now you have Jesus again, who's ultimately going to be passed to Herod and passed back to Pilate, and then later on you have Paul being persecuted and brought to by some people that were falsely claiming that he was doing something against the state, just like Jesus did. And again, there's another Herod there listening to him give his testimony. And so this model of people who, when you proclaim the truth, are going to constantly come at you, and some Well, what John the Baptist said wasn't very nice, but it was the good thing to do. And he probably said it in the kindest way you could say something like that, but it is what needed to be said to bring about truth. And when he said it, it cost him his life. So he wasn't concerned about trying to be nice to everybody. He was concerned about the truth being proclaimed and doing so in a way that honors God.
And when Elijah ran away from Jezebel and Ahab, he jumped in the ocean, was swallowed by a big whale for 3 days, and that's why Captain Ahab went out to kill Moby Dick, right?
Nah, I don't know if that's my Bible, but
no, it might be my illustration book. But.
And Moses had brought animals into the ark too.
Yeah. So there's just this family tree is pretty
it's creepy,
and it's crazy. You got Herod the Great. He has 4 sons. He's got Aristarchus, Herod Antipas, Philip, and Aristobulus, and Herodias just kind of runs around with all of them. Starts with Philip, then Herod Antipas takes her, and then after he dies, and Philip's dead, she ends up marrying Herod Agrippa the first, and he has, who is the son of Aristobulus, so even younger. And then you've got Herod the Agrippa the first has Agrippa the second, and with Bernice and Felix and Drusilla, who show up in the court scene with Paul. So all these people show up, and it's always kind of this mess of a family tree.
Yes,
they're all corrupt.
It's the original Lady Macbeth running around seeking power and encouraging men to get in fights. Yeah.
So, all right. Yeah. Welcome to Herod.
And
have a nice day.
So one of the things we chatted about earlier, and again, talking about sharing the gospel and saying hard things and having the courage to say the hard things as well. And I think sometimes in our culture today, just is like, we've got to be nice, and Stephen was pointing out that the Bible never tells us to be nice. It tells us to be, we said in the sermon. It tells us to be kind.
Yeah.
What is the difference between kindness and niceness? How would you define those?
Well, I think niceness is this idea that you're supposed to just not hurt anybody's feelings. Like, that's the best way I can put it. Kindness is that you're supposed to care about someone for their good. So one is based on the good, the other is based on feelings. And so the danger of being nice, as we all know, you can put on a nice face, but niceness doesn't equate to being good. Niceness is something that is kind of this cover over of being, I don't want to, it's almost a put off.
It's usually people saying, I want to be loving without any truth too. So it's like, I want to be nice. I want to say kind things to you, but is it true? Is it good? And is it, you call that loving, and I don't think it is. Sometimes the truth you have to speak, and it hurts, but it's the most loving thing you could do. It is the kindness. It's a kindness that a lot of people don't offer to you. It's like when you have your zipper down and everybody's too embarrassed to tell you, so they just let you walk around that way.
Or preach your first sermon that way.
Oh, man, yeah. Thanks a lot, people.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. It's like some people are so quote-unquote nice. It's because you don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. Well, that's actually not very kind, because sometimes people are going to feel like more betrayed, or they're going to get before God and say, you had the answers and you didn't bother to tell me? Well, I didn't want to hurt your feelings. Well, you didn't care about my feelings at all, and now I'm being punished. So it's like this idea that like the best thing for someone, the most good you can have for someone, is to never confront them, is, I think, a lie. And I don't think anyone lives that way honestly with the people that they're in relationships with. I always worry when someone says, I never want to have any conflict at all. And I'm like, well, then you never want to grow. Because the Bible even says if you go out and proclaim the truth, people are going to get upset.
Yeah. In fact, every time I see kindness and it's useful. It's based on loving mercy. So you're being merciful to someone when you tell them the truth. It may not feel like you're being merciful, and that's the difference. Niceness is based on a reflective, personal attribute. Like, nobody would ever be fired if you always had to be nice.
The trains would crash into each other
because I couldn't tell you
planes
no
would fall out of the sky because I don't want to hurt your feelings because you're not really good at flying.
You're not being nice, and it's like that's not the biblical injunction at all. In fact, I just typed nice into my Bible search engine, and you know how many times it shows up in the Bible?
None.
0.
Yeah.
It's not
Now, do
a
you feel
word.
like
It's
nice
not a
is-
biblical word.
I mean, in this discussion, it almost seems as though nice is being perceived as not real, right?
Flattery, false flattery.
Yeah,
It is
but
flattery.
do you feel like nice is not always insincere? That you can be nice.
Well, I
and
think when it's
sincere.
not insincere, it's kindness.
Kindness, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say there are people that are just always like, you're the best, you're awesome. And I don't want to discourage them from being kind people, but I don't know how much I believe it after a while. And if you really want to test it, just go to them when you're feeling down and they're not necessarily interested in talking to you and see if they extend the same number of kindness.
I did find it. I found an instance of nice, and it'll help. It's in the net version, and it's in Isaiah 30:10. It says, "They say to the visionaries, 'See no more visions,' and to the seers, 'Don't relate messages to us about what is right. Tell us nice things. Relate deceptive messages.'"
Wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's sad.
Wow.
Yeah, I do think the illusion that people have offered is that Christians are supposed to be nice. I think that is a false belief in the world. And you have to say, I believe Christians are supposed to proclaim the truth and seek goodness and do so with love and kindness. But that's not the same as being nice all the time and never letting anyone hear what they need to hear. Now, it does mean you have to know what you need to say. And I think the problem is if we don't spend enough time in the Word, you kind of know something's wrong, but you don't know why. Because you don't really see enough of where God is to tell someone else, I think something's wrong. Well, I don't want to say anything because I don't know if I'm right.
And I don't want to be mean.
I don't want to hurt their feelings and bring up a subject I might not know anything about. And I think sometimes you can be what I consider to be very much like kind in the sense like, look, I'm sensing this, I'm feeling this, I don't know if it's true, but I don't want you to go without being hurt, so I want to bring this up. What do you think? I'm not saying I have all the answers, and if people say that to you and you're not willing to explore it, there's a sensitivity to you that's too big that you can't handle someone trying to help you get through something. Someone came up to me, and I've had this before, and they're like, I'm sensing something about you. You have this attitude problem. And if they're a friend, I'm going to be like, oh, okay, well, what do you see? And they might go, I don't know exactly, but it's something like this. Now we're working on the problem together. There's a problem there. But, if they never told me that and they felt that way, they're still acting on the feelings. It's a lot of people will do passive aggressive comments. They'll say certain little things to you when you feel like, are we supposed to have a big conversation? What am I missing? I feel like I'm walking around naked and everybody sees it but me because we're too uncomfortable to bring up a subject that we're having. It's okay to own the lack of knowledge you have about what's stirring you, unless you're doing it consistently just to get a rise out of people or to control people. The intent always has to be something that honors God. And if you're not very clear, the clarity is on the part of the person giving you the information, right? So if someone comes up to me and goes, I have a problem with you, I go, what is it? They go, I don't know. And I've had this happen a lot of time in the military where people are hitting you up and you're like, I just don't like you. And you're like, can I get a clue as what I could do to solve the problem? And they're like, nope. And you're just like stuck there going, well, I don't know how to fix this problem now. And so that's not helpful either if you're using it as a means to just communicate what you feel.
So I think what we've gotten confused as a culture is we use the opposites are you're either mean or you're nice. And nice people, what's the statement that we say? Like,
nice guys finish last? No.
No, yeah, nice guys, but no. But this is like the idea of you're either mean or you're nice. But the Bible's like, the thing about this, because you can be nice and be cruel. And the Bible has a lot more say about being cruel than
false flatteries, right?
Right, and it has nothing. Actually, I just looked it up. I can't find mean. Nowhere does it use mean as the way we use mean in the Bible. Like, you're being mean. He was mean. That was a mean thing to do. None of it was mean, is mean, be mean. None of it in any translation shows up that way because it's not a category in the biblical thinking. We've created this idea of being mean. You're mean. And it comes from bullying. It comes from this background of stuff like that, where it's like, what we mean is you're being cruel. You're being
you're saying false things usually.
Yeah, well, you're trying to hurt someone on purpose.
Yeah.
And so suddenly, this idea of being mean and being nice, these are been elevated as the top virtues in American society, and they don't help us because they're both very, because you can be mean and be good. there are a lot of good, mean people. It's mean to tell someone, get up and stop crying. You don't have anything to worry about right now. Get moving, because we're going to be about to be attacked, right? Like, yeah, you were mean. So I was trying to help
for
you.
your value, for your benefit.
Right. This is about your benefit, your good. That was actually a kindness I did to you. If I sat there and said, oh, you're right, just sit there. It's okay. And I'm nice to you, and you stay and you die, I was cruel. Like, that's a cruel thing. We would think that's an evil person. And so meanness and niceness, we've just got to, as Christians, start realizing these are really unhelpful categories that we've adopted over the last couple of decades, maybe I don't know how long those concepts have. It really has been the last couple of decades. I feel like
it's changed. The meanings
50
have
years
changed.
or so.
Yeah,
and so we've just got to get that somehow washed out of our thinking process, because it is hindering the gospel.
Well, when you remove what's good from the conversation, then we no longer have ability to know if someone who's saying things I don't like is doing it because they care about me or not, or because it's true or not. And so we have no litmus test. There's no kind of standard in the military, because everybody's mean to you. You have to sit there and still filter out, like, are they doing it for my goodness, or are they doing it for the person just has a bad attitude today? And oftentimes, sometimes you don't know, but in the structure, it's set up to kind of try to do that. And if that person did something that was willfully trying to hurt you, and they found out about it, he would get in trouble, because it's supposed to be something that helps people get better, because you're doing a difficult task. You don't want people to false flatter you if you're going to fight a war, or if you're going to be in harm's way, or you're going to be in danger. It's crucial to tell people how to get stronger, how to get better, how to improve, and to rub elbows with them to pick them up when they're down and make them run the next lap. And I think we don't have that in our culture, because we're detached from other people. Used to be like, you can think of the basic training as bullying. If your definition is they say things that are mean to you. When bullies bully, they're, like you said, there's an intent to doing something that's cruel. And so I think we have to watch that. What is the true intent of the person trying to help you? Are they trying to help you because they've been there for you? They've showed you that they're there on your side, or are they trying to do it to bring you down? And then, do you believe it, and is it true?
All right. So we're running out of time here, so we're going to get on to some questions. And again, I didn't get any questions from our email, so we're going back to Debbie's long list of questions. Thank you, Debbie. Yes, we appreciate it. And so a couple of things, and I think some of these will be really quick. But in Genesis 19:8, she's reading, and she says, "Why would Lot offer up his daughters to be used and abused?" So again, setting up the story, right? The angels come to the door, and he's terrified and says, "I'll give you my daughters. Have your way with them, and leave us in safety." Or he was protecting the angels, and the townspeople came to the door and wanted to kill the angels, and he was like, "I'll send my daughters out there."
No, they wanted to rape the angels. They didn't want to kill the angels.
Oh yeah, okay. And so he's like, "No, here, use my daughters. Have your way with them." And he's protecting these visitors that he doesn't even know, and giving away his daughters for the mob to manhandle.
So let's make this clear. First and foremost, this is not depicted in the scriptures as a good. Okay, like, this is not like, hey, because Paul,
look at Job. Please emulate Job. If you have a stranger come to your house and want to stay, give your daughters away.
So the problem comes up when Peter later calls Lot righteous. People go like, how can Lot be righteous? He did this thing. Well, that is a determination, because when Abraham in the previous chapter is told by Yahweh that he's going to, that Yahweh's going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham goes like, well, if there's a couple is there 100 righteous people, would you do it? No. If there are 50? No. 25? Hey, is there a couple? And basically it's like, no, the one righteous guy will pull out of there. But then you get there, and God sees him as righteous. And a couple quick things. Number one, the women are not given over to be raped. Like, God,
the angels aren't going to let that happen.
The angels don't let that happen. This shows that God is protecting Lot from sinning, yeah. Two, to protecting the women from being raped and killed, because he wants them to be saved. But guess what? it also reveals at the exact same time God is being merciful to Lot because Lot is affected by the morals of the place that he's living in.
Yeah,
he's taken hospitality and twisted it all up into like, well, I got to keep these people hospitably safe.
He's in the dark and can't see the light.
Right, exactly.
Well, part of it is we have this thing that we hear righteous and we think perfect. So the idea that he's a person who's righteous, that means that he's not capable of sin. And I find that when you read David, he's a man who follows Yahweh, but he still sins. And God's still gracious to him, but he offers him a prophet to tell him, you need to get this right. And there are consequences for his sin. There are consequences for Lot's sins. So sometimes God is merciful to us, and we are capable of doing horrible things, even as Christians or believers in Yahweh. It just means that when you look at the totality of Lot's life later on, he's a Yahweh follower. But it doesn't really negate the fact that a Yahweh follower can't do something horrible.
Not to mention, he's the only one in the group that God doesn't allow to do something horrible. He stops him from offering his daughters, but then you turn right around and his wife looks back and longingly to live in Sodom, though it's being destroyed. And then his daughters get him drunk and rape him. And so it's this kind of like...
They've all picked up bad habits.
All got some really bad corruption going down inside. So it's not a pretty story. It's that story that I realized when I told my son, Nathaniel, he was just like, go ahead, read through your Bible. And he got to Lot and he's like, Dad,
what is this?
What is this? I'm like, oh, yeah, go to the New Testament.
Yeah. I mean,
I think it was 8. It was like,
there's just worms eating people's intestines there. It's not as bad as the Old
That's a
Testament.
little better.
Part of it too is like people look at Job. He was the righteous that was let out of
Lot.
Did I say Job again? Dang it. Went Lot, and he was let out of that because he was a righteous man, and people think he's a good guy.
Yeah, that's the difference is.
Yeah. And I forgot where I was going with that. Oh, it's kind of like everybody kind of looks at Jonah and goes, he was a good guy, God called him to save that city.
Well, I think he was a good guy. I think he was using his life as a parable to tell these people, this is how we are.
Well, he's mentioned again in Kings, and the question and debate there is the fact that is he doing this after the story or before? Because in that story, he's like, oh, God's going to be kind or merciful. And you don't know what his motive is. If he wrote it after, then he's like, oh, I learned my lesson. If he wrote it before, that's his problem with Lot. So it is interesting to see that he may have learned and wrote that whole thing just to tell people how bad he was.
Jonah.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
it's a really good book.
I think a lot of people think like Jonah's a hero in
he's
this
not
story.
He's
not
a hero.
He's not a hero.
Wasn't that nice that all the Yahweh followers use the worst parts of their testimony in order to tell other people that God's gracious?
Wow.
I mean, you just see that pattern constantly in the Bible. It's like even in Mark. Mark is mostly talking from Peter's point of view, and you have him going like, I did all these awful things, and it's in the book of Mark. So
I think we can wrap up this one question here in just a couple of minutes. So in Genesis 29:23, Debbie asks, how could Jacob sleep with the wrong daughter on his wedding night? For crying out loud.
Yeah, this has to do with circumcision, so I'll let you go. I'm just kidding. It has nothing to do with circumcision.
No, that would have
been
the other way
one,
around.
they didn't have incandescent lighting.
There was a huge ceremonial part of the marriage ceremony, and women were veiled, and the excitement of the time, and him thinking it was a deception on Laban's part. He knew that he would be so excited to be with one person that he switched out, and that he wouldn't even bother to notice. And also, a lot of times it's dark. They kind of consummate the marriage at the feast. They go into this room, it's dark, and in there they consummate the marriage, and then come out and show everybody with some of the traditions. So it would have been easy to deceive someone in that climate than it would be now.
Also, remember, Jacob is not a Yahweh follower at that point.
He's still struggling with God.
He's still wrestling with God in his heart.
Is this his God or not?
And so he is drunker than a skunk on his wedding
he's probably
night.
drunk too.
So that is probably adding to his inability to tell what in the world is going on. Lots of drunkenness and sex in Genesis. Like, guys, don't do that. Like, don't get drunk.
You're going to end up marrying the wrong person if you do that. Of the Old Testament.
There's really no good stories in the Bible about drunkenness and morality.
No. None.
All right.
Drink your water, people.
We made it better than the ancient world.
Yeah. Anyway, Lots of crazy stuff. Well, we hope that you have enjoyed this romp down some very interesting rabbit trails today. Debbie,
You got
again,
a lot
thank
of
you.
new information to process.
Debbie, thank you for your questions, and we'll get to even more next time. If you have some extra questions, maybe you got some comments, something you'd like to share with us, let us know. You can drop us a line at our email, rabbittrail, that's with rabbit with a T and trail with another T at the beginning. So 2 T's, rabbittrail@obcc.church. That's rabbittrail@obcc.church. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to hear how you think we're doing. If you like this, like Stephen said, share it out there. Let people know. We've got some upcoming cool things from a men's retreat that's happening, or a conference coming up in a couple of weeks. Be looking for our women's events that are coming, and we're going to have some James Projects and other opportunities that'll be shine up on your horizons if you're part of the church. Otherwise, if you're interested, come check us out. We'd love to have you here on Sunday. And may God bless you guys as you go through the rest of your week.
Boom, chakalaka.
Bye.